Looks at your faces, just English then. Enjoy. No.
So welcome to Fort George. My name is Jared. The weapon here is called the Shortland Pattern Tower Flintlock Smoothbore Muzzle-Loading Musket. Now I agree that is a bit of a mouthful. 200 years ago nobody had the time or patience to say any of that, so it became known as the Brown Bess. Now the number one thing to keep in mind about this weapon is that 200 years ago it is the peak and pinnacle of military technology. Every major army in the world was using a weapon very similar to this by design because they're very cheap to produce and it's very easy for new recruits to pick this weapon up and learn how to fire it in a very short period of time. Aside from the weapon itself, the only other thing required is a cartridge, which historically is just a rolled tube of wax paper with 120 grains of black powder and a musket ball attached at the end. But to get at that black powder, you didn't have the time or the free hand to untwist the top, you had to bite into the cartridge. So signing up in the British Army did require at least 2 teeth in your mouth. One on the top, one on the bottom, preferably on the right-hand side, but regardless of where they appear, they do have to touch, because if they don't, it makes for a pretty lousy afternoon trying to gum your way through that paper. After you've bitten your way through, you're going to pour some of that powder into a thing here called the pan, which has a shape very similar to a spoon and holds what's called your prime. You lock that into place by shutting this hardened piece of steel called the frizzen. You're ready to cast about and load the rest of the charge down the barrel. To ensure it gets all the way to the bottom, you push everything down with the ramrod, and then it's very important to make sure you put the ramrod back. Because don't get me wrong, you absolutely can fire this thing. It does make an awesome projectile flying across the field and shish kebabbing anyone on the other side. It's kind of awkward though to have to walk across the battlefield and ask for it back. So after all that, you are ready to fire one shot. Now this is the machine gun of its day, and a well-trained British soldier was expected to fire once every one using speed, not accuracy. So after you're all loaded up, the only steps left are to pull the hammer and pull the trigger. When you do so, hopefully a few things should happen. Hopefully this hammer flies forward. Hopefully the flint strikes the frizzen. Hopefully that contact creates sparks. Hopefully those sparks fall into the pan. Hopefully that detonates the prime in your pan. Hopefully that ignition travels through a small hole called the vent. Hopefully that detonates the main charge and sends the ball flying off towards your enemy. On a good day. Because there's a lot of hoping, wishing, and praying with this weapon because of how unreliable it is in the field. For 2 major reasons. First being the firing mechanism itself. It's external, not internal, so it's very susceptible to things like the weather. If it's raining outside, yeah, this weapon's not going to work. And there are accounts of battles being called off because it was too rainy and nobody was firing anything. If it's very windy outside, the wind could blow the black powder or the sparks from the pan, the weapon will not fire. If it's very humid outside, the black powder can absorb the moisture from the air, the weapon will not fire. If it's holiday Monday and the musket doesn't feel like firing, the weapon will not fire. So there's a whole host of reasons why this gun will not go off, so many that the British gave it a 30% misfire rate, which is to say for every 10 times this trigger gets pulled, 7 times you should hear the nice loud call it such. Muskets and rifles look very similar, yes, but on the inside they're different weapon systems. Rifles have rifled grooves, a smoothbore musket does not. And this weapon fires a 68 caliber ball from a 75 caliber barrel. A massive projectile, even by today's standards, but still smaller than the barrel you're putting it down. So that is going to expedite your loading process, also leaves a heck of a lot of extra room for that ball to bounce, rattle, jingle, jangle, and leave at whatever angle it feels like once the trigger is pulled. So this weapon is only accurate to 75 yards from where I am standing to that palisade fence on your right-hand side. From that distance, we found you can hit a man-sized target whilst aiming center mass about 8 times out of 10. Aiming center mass does not mean hitting center mass, but you hit anyone anywhere with a 68 caliber soft lead ball, your job's done. And nowhere did it state you had to start battle against your target by up to 9 feet in any direction. So, who here thinks this weapon just plain sucks? Yeah, I tend to agree. It's the last thing you'd want on a modern battlefield. The question then becomes, how do you make this thing effective with all these drawbacks? And for that we turn to something called linear tactics. Something you've all seen an example of. You've all wondered, why on earth are they standing in those big dumb lines? Battlefield load. For safety, I just ask, if you promise to stay on this side of the path, I promise I'll stay on my side. And once I'm done, I'll come back and very quickly discuss the secondary weapon of the British soldier.
Shish kebab along the battlefield.
Okay, that's for me.
Because it's be a skilly, you know.
I know.
Puppetry.
At 17 inches of steel that fits quite comfortably at the end of the weapon. You can still load and fire with the bayonet attached. This thing does not misfire, and also made a great deterrence for cavalry. But it was the soldiers themselves that were the most afraid of this weapon because of the triangular-shaped wound it left behind. Rather nasty 3 sides that surgeons couldn't handle in 1812. They could suture 2 of those sides up, but going for that third, well, those 2 sides tended to pop back open. Even if they could shut the skin wound, did nothing for the new triangular hole inside of your body, and if you somehow survived that, nobody said you had to sterilize this thing. Infection would spread, you were done for. Your only hope of salvation lay in an extremities hit to the arms or legs, and now you do have an option, amputation. And surgeons became quite skilled